Hi everybody and welcome to week 4. So sorry that I couldn't be with you in person this week, but I still wanted to go over the content with all of you. So this week we're focusing on priority management or time management, and it's going to help you make better use of your valuable time. So today's class will focus on practical techniques and information that you can start using right away today to gain more control over your busy schedule. So we're going to cover everything from planning to prioritizing to delegating to controlling the people who control your time. And we'll talk about how to deal more efficiently with meetings, phones, paperwork, interruptions, and emergencies without letting them sidetrack you and sabotage your schedule. So first we'll talk about potential ways to waste time to help you identify your personal hit list. And next, we'll discuss the many ways you can organize your school day more efficiently so that you have time for all the things that you need to accomplish. Then we'll suggest ways to avoid getting sidetracked and keeping to your schedule despite meetings, paperwork, interruptions, and the inevitable unexpected situations that demand your time. And finally, we'll wrap up the presentation today with a summary and a personal time management audit worksheet, which is going to help you find out exactly where you need to take tighter control of your time. So looking here, I want you guys to think about these common time management myths and think about what's wrong with these statements. So the first one, which says we can manage time. What's wrong with this? We cannot manage our time, and nor can we save it. So time ticks away relentlessly in spite of our efforts to control it. We're provided with 24 hours of time each day to use as we like, and the key is in how we use that time. We can use it wisely or we can waste it, but we can never save it, and at the end of the day, it's gone. The second one here says time management involves getting more done in less time. So some people may believe that, but effective time management refers to getting done fewer things of greater importance. We can't possibly do everything that we want to do or all the things there are to do. But if we prioritize what there is to do and focus on completing the priorities to the exclusion of everything else, we will then become more effective. The third one lists that people need something expensive or electronic to get organized. So people are not organized because they use a time management system. They use a time management system because they are organized. Personal organization involves breaking old habits and forming new, effective ones. It's a state of mind as opposed to a state of your workspace. Some people are more organized using a 65-cent notebook than others are using a $65 organizer that you purchase. Number 4. The biggest time wasters are telephone interruptions, visitors, meetings, and rush jobs. So these are not actually time wasters, they are time obligations, and they come with the job of going to school, right? The biggest time wasters are self-imposed, such as procrastination, making mental notes, interrupting ourselves, searching for things, perfectionism, and spending time on trivial tasks. We are our own worst enemies, and being effective involves managing ourselves and not placing the blame on others. Number 5, it's most efficient to stick to one task until it's done. So it may be more efficient, but it's not more effective, because seldom will you have time to finish it. It's more effective to break large projects down into small 1 or 2 hour chunks and work at them for a brief period each day. Working on priorities involves frequent brief sprints, not occasional marathons. And then finally, time is money. Time is more than money, it's life. You can always get more money, but you can never get more time because it's an irreplaceable resource. When time's gone, you are gone. So most of us spend our days reacting to other people's demands instead of directing how our time will be spent. And it's a struggle to find quiet, uninterrupted time for planning and catching up on our own work or schoolwork. And so we end up staying up super late to try and get things done. Too often we spend our time meeting short-term commitments, putting out fires rather than working on long-term goals. And our days are filled with activity, but nothing really worthwhile seems to be accomplished. So the time-wasting effects of inadequate preparation or not planning ahead can be seen in long meetings sometimes where nothing is accomplished, where you're working on your schoolwork and nothing seems to be accomplished and you find yourself really distracted. So excessive attention to detail also needlessly eats up valuable time. Of course, everyone wants things to be done right, and quality performance is essential, especially in schoolwork, but striving for perfection that can never really be achieved and isn't really required to maintain getting your work done leaves little time for the really important things. People who try to do everything themselves are wasting their own time. They're also wasting other people's time by not letting them grow in their education journey through added responsibilities. Minimizing time wasters and gaining control over your time begins with effective planning. The minutes or hours you spend planning before you act can later turn into days or weeks of time saved. The first step in planning is to take a few minutes each morning to make a list of all the tasks you have to accomplish that day. Some people like to draw up this list the night before so that they can jump right into things in the morning. At the beginning of each week, create an expanded list that includes all the essential tasks and activities that must be completed for the week. This list would include deadlines for short-term projects, scheduled meetings and appointments, any schoolwork deadlines you have, and so forth. At the beginning of each month, draw up a master list for that month. And some of you may need to expand this monthly list, maybe to a quarterly one or even an annual one, depending on what your schoolwork responsibilities are and the time frames for these schoolwork projects. And this will give you a broader perspective of your schedule and allow you to plan your time well in advance to include due dates for long-term projects, training schedules, any personal responsibilities you have, and so forth. Be sure to update your lists each morning, adding new tasks and responsibilities, and crossing off jobs that have already been completed. The most efficient way to construct daily, weekly, and monthly activity lists is to write them down. So for some of us, this may be maintaining a master calendar of events using a hard copy organizer. And for others, this might be using a technology option like our cell phones, where we have reminders and the calendar events in there. It's really going to be up to you to manage this in a way that makes the most sense to you. I personally do very well with a hard copy organizer using a pencil so that I can erase things and add them later. You can definitely consider high-tech options if you're interested, but you don't have to.
In order to prioritize tasks effectively, you have to have clear goals in mind first. A lot of time is wasted when people put effort into activities that don't directly relate to achieving desired goals. Defining goals requires first determining the desired end result. What exactly do you need to achieve? Short-term objectives are the means of achieving goals. They are the steps that must be taken to successfully arrive at a goal. They must be clearly stated and organized in a realistic sequence. As you work toward your goals, realize that you will need to adjust your objectives as conditions change. If conditions change significantly, you may also need to redefine your goals.
Organizing your tasks and responsibilities into a prioritized sequence on a daily basis is essential to help you avoid scattering your energies and ending up the day with vital tasks that have been left undone. Each day, rank your tasks and commitments you've listed on your calendar in order of importance. You can do this simply by placing numbered tasks, with 1 being the most important and so on. But perhaps the most effective method is to assign a priority letter to each task. So A stands for must-do tasks with the highest priority. B tasks are important and worthwhile, but if for some reason they cannot be accomplished that day, there's not going to be a crisis. And finally, C tasks can wait until you have the time to do them. Be strict with yourself about assigning priorities, and don't fall into the trap of making everything a top priority item. Remember, too, that B and C tasks may eventually become A tasks tomorrow or next week. When prioritizing, build in time for the unexpected, things that may arise and outrank items on your list, and adjust your prioritized list accordingly. Be sure to allow sufficient time in the day for planning, thinking, making decisions, solving problems, things that only you can do. Don't fill your list with so many high priority items that you have no time for these important aspects of your job. And remain flexible. As the day progresses, you may want to reassign priorities. A change in plans, orders from your teacher, or even you reconsidering something may lead you to move some items up and some items down the scale. Accept the fact that you probably won't finish all the tasks that you have assigned yourself each day, and consider it a successful day if you are able to accomplish most of the A items on your list. Remember to roll over uncompleted items to tomorrow's list and reprioritize. When you are working your way through this prioritization activity, I want you to ask yourself the following questions. Is this the best use of my time? And is this what I want or need to be doing right now? And that should help you narrow down how to prioritize your tasks. The best time for planning, problem solving, writing reports, making essential phone calls, and so on is your prime time. This may be the time when you have the most energy. For example, first thing in the morning when you're rested and before the day starts to get busy. Or if you're a night owl, this might be in the evening for you. Your prime time may also be the time of day when there are fewest interruptions for you. Or it might be at any other time of the day when you can schedule some private time and find a quiet place to work without interruptions or the demands of your other responsibilities, lunchtime for example. Whenever your personal prime time is, it's important to identify this time of day to block it off to accomplish your most pressing tasks for the day. So each of us has an energy cycle, kind of going back to the concept of prime time throughout the day. So think about when you are the most energetic. Is it in the morning? Is it in the afternoon? Is it late in the evening? And use that time again to prioritize when you do the most of your work. While you're trying to focus on your work, it's also important to be aware of your energy gains and drains. So what are the things that energize you, and focus on those? Is it a quiet work and study space? Is it a noisy work and study space? And then also be mindful of the things that exhaust you. So for me, that would be a noisy workspace. I would need to be located in a quiet study space, avoiding the radio, avoiding Netflix, because I would become distracted by those things and not be able to focus on the tasks at hand. So be mindful of the things that energize you and mindful of the things that exhaust you, and try to make it a good environment to get your work done. Putting things off is a trap we all fall into to some degree at some time or another. But this just ends up putting more pressure on our already busy schedules. The first step in dealing with the tendency to procrastinate is to break the job up into smaller parts. This makes the task appear less overwhelming. You don't have to do the whole job at once, you only need to handle it a piece at a time. Beginning with the easiest parts of the job helps to get you started. Each little bit you accomplish is a step in the right direction. Accomplishment leads to a feeling of fulfillment, and this gives you the energy and encouragement to persevere. Once the easy parts are done, it's time to face the hard or unpleasant tasks squarely. Just do it, as the saying goes. Accept the fact that now is as good a time as any to get this part of the job done. Timing yourself is a little trick that can help. Tell yourself that you'll work on the task for at least 10 or 15 minutes and then you can quit and do something else. You may well find that you'll want to go on once you've started, but even if you don't, you'll feel satisfied about getting a good start. Punishing yourself by giving yourself a consequence if you don't do the 10 to 15 minutes might be useful for you. Saying, okay, well, I don't get to watch TV after this break because I didn't get it done. That might motivate you. For some, that may not work at all. And finally, reward yourself for a job well done as each piece of the task is completed. Switch to something you enjoy doing. It may sound silly, but reward plays a subtle but powerful role in motivating you to persevere and get the job done. Except for the most dire emergencies, most unexpected problems can wait a little while. Resist the temptation to drop everything and run to put out a fire. Try to finish what you're doing first, give yourself some time to think about an appropriate response, and then take action to handle the problem. Spend only as much time as necessary on emergencies. Once the situation is under control, try to see if you can delegate anything to someone else who can help you. Use your time for following up and developing plans to anticipate and avoid such problems in the future. And finally, return to your established schedule as soon as possible. Go back to your daily to-do list and pick up right where you left off. Try not to let unexpected events throw a monkey wrench into your whole day. You can say no and mean it when someone suggests something that you'd like to consider but you're not sure, when the timing's just not right for you, or when you have other priorities. Next up for our consideration is a video called How to Multiply Your Time, which was given by Rory Vaden at TEDx Douglasville.
You may have thought that we started late, but it is ironic that the first speaker would be the author of the book, Procrastinate on Purpose. How is it that we have more tips and tricks, tools and technology, calendars and checklists than ever before, and yet we still always seem to be behind? How is it that we work longer hours? We're moving faster than we've ever moved in history, and yet we never seem to be caught up? How is it that we know more about time management today, and yet stress is at an all-time high? The reason why is because everything you know about time management is wrong. I first started to realize this a couple years ago. It was early on a Saturday morning. I was at my business partner's house, and I was picking him up for a very important international leader planning retreat. And he has this 2-year-old baby girl named Haven. And Haven is the sweetest little thing you can imagine. She has curly brown hair and these sweet, soft brown eyes. And we live in Nashville, so she has a little southern accent that's developing. And as I'm picking up Dustin and we're about to leave, Haven comes sprinting down the hallway. And she leaps and she latches on to Dustin's leg. And she says, "Daddy, where are you going?" And he looks down at her and he says, "Oh, I'm sorry, baby Haven. Daddy actually has to go to work today." And she looks up at him and her eyes well up with tears. And she says, "No, Daddy. Please, no work today. No work, Daddy." And in that moment, I realized two things. The first is that I myself am not ready to have kids just yet. The second is that even though everything that you've ever heard about time management is all logical, tips and tricks, tools and technology, calendars and checklists, it's apps, it's all logic. What I realized in that moment from a 2-year-old is that today time management is no longer just logical. Today, time management is emotional. And how our feelings of guilt and fear and worry and anxiety and frustration, those things dictate how we choose to spend our time as much as anything that's in our calendar or on our to-do list. In fact, there is no such thing as time management. You can't manage time. Time continues on whether we like it or not. So there is no such thing as time management. Really, there is only self-management. Well, that was the first big realization that I had. In order for you to understand the second, I want to take you on a quick history of time management theory. And that really began in the late 50s and 60s. And it came during the Industrial Revolution. And early time management thought was all about, it was one-dimensional. And it was all based on efficiency. And the idea with efficiency was that if we could develop tools and technology to help us do things faster, then theoretically that would give us more time. Well, there's nothing wrong with efficiency. All things being equal, efficiency is better. And yet, there is an unfortunate limitation to efficiency as a strategy for time management. And it's evidenced very well by the fact that we all carry around miniature computers in our pockets, and yet somehow we're still never caught up. Well, in the late 80s, Era 2 time management thinking emerged. I feel like it was pretty much single-handedly ushered in by the late, great Dr. Stephen Covey. And Dr. Covey introduced what we are referring to as two-dimensional thinking. He gave us something called the time management matrix, where the x-axis was urgency and the y-axis was importance. And the beauty about this was that it gave us a system for scoring our tasks. And then based on how they scored in these two areas, we could prioritize tasks one in front of the other. Prioritizing is all about focusing first on what matters most. And for the last 20 years, this has really been the pervasive mode of thinking as it relates to time management theory. And it's not that there's anything wrong with prioritizing. In fact, prioritizing is as valuable a skill today as it ever has been in history. And yet, even though we throw that word around like it's the end-all be-all to time management theory, right? We say, get your priorities in order. Or it's just, you don't have the right priorities. Well, unfortunately, maybe that's not really the case. Because there is a massive limitation to prioritizing that nobody ever talks about, and that is this. There's nothing about prioritizing that creates more time. All prioritizing does is take item number 7 on your to-do list and it bumps it up to number 1, which is valuable in and of itself, but it doesn't do anything inherently to create more time, and it does nothing to help you accomplish the other items on your to-do list. I mean, if you think about efficiency is kind of like running on a hamster wheel. And if you think of prioritizing, it's really about borrowing time from one activity to spend on another. It's kind of like juggling. And that really describes the way that we even talk about time. I'm juggling a lot, or I'm trying to balance a lot. And in that paradigm, there's only two strategies. One is to do things faster or to do more things. And that is what the world kind of feels like, right? How does it feel to know that really all we are is a bunch of juggling hamsters sprinting towards an inevitable crash landing? You cannot solve today's time management problems with yesterday's time management thinking. What we've noticed is the emergence of a new type of thinker, somebody that we refer to as a multiplier. And multipliers use what we call three-dimensional thinking. While most people only make decisions based on urgency and importance, multipliers are making a third calculation which is based on significance. And if urgency is how soon does something matter, and importance is how much does it matter, then significance is how long is it going to matter. It's a completely different paradigm. It's adding on to what is there. It's in with the old, but it's also in with the new. Because most of us, if you think about the modern day to-do list, which is one of the key strategies or tools that we have, we ask ourselves, when we assemble our to-do list, we say, what's the most important thing I can do today? But that is not how multipliers think. Multipliers instead ask the question, what can I do today that would make tomorrow better? What can I do right now that would make the future better? They're making the significance calculation. See, when I say multiply your time, that might sound a little bit superfluous. It might sound like an over-exaggeration, but it really is not. Now, while it is true that we all have the same amount of time inside of one day, 24 hours, 1,440 minutes, 86,400 seconds. And there's nothing that any of us can do to create more time in one day. But that's exactly the problem. That type of thinking is the problem. What we have to do is break out of that paradigm and instead think about tomorrow. And that brings us to the premise for how you multiply time. The way that you multiply time is simple. You multiply your time by giving yourself the emotional permission to spend time on things today that give you more time tomorrow. That's the significance calculation. You multiply time by giving yourself the emotional permission to spend time on things today that create more time tomorrow. The significance calculation changes everything. The focus funnel is our attempt to create a visual depiction that codifies the thought process that multipliers go through in their head unconsciously when they are evaluating how to spend their time. It's why some people create extraordinary, explosive, exponential results, and other people seem to kind of just create linear traction. And it works like this. If your tasks all come into the top of the funnel, the first question a multiplier asks is, can I eliminate this? Is it even worth doing? It's another example how everything you know about time management is wrong, or at least that it has changed, because most of us use to-do lists, and multipliers realize that next generation time management has much more to do with what you don't do than what you do. Time multipliers realize that perfection is achieved not only when nothing more can be added, but when nothing more can be taken away. It is the permission to ignore. Because anything that we say no to today creates more time for us tomorrow. The challenge emotionally is that we struggle with guilt and we struggle with wanting to say no, but really feeling like we have to say yes. And so we go through life trying to never say no. And in one of the interviews I conducted with the multiplier, they said something that changed my life. They said, Rory, it's futile to go through life trying to never say no. What you have to realize is that you are always saying no to something. Because anytime you say yes to one thing, you are simultaneously saying no to an infinite number of others. If you can't eliminate the task, the next question is, can I automate the task? Anything that I create a process for today saves me time tomorrow. It's like setting up online bill pay. I never have 2 hours in my day to set up online bill pay. I just don't have time. And if I had 2 hours in my day, I would never use it to set up online bill pay. But a multiplier realizes that if I save 30 minutes a month from paying my bills by setting up online bill pay, then it makes sense to invest those 2 hours, because then after just 4 months' time, I will have broken even on that investment. And every month thereafter, I will get something we call ROTI, return on time invested. Automation is to your time exactly what compounding interest is to your money. Just like compounding interest takes money and it makes money into more money, automation takes time and it makes it into more time. The way that wealthy people think about money is exactly the same way that multipliers think about time. And they give themselves the permission to invest the time and energy to automate the process. If it can't be automated, then the next question is, can it be delegated? Can I teach someone else how to do this? I'm reminded of a time when I was 7 years old, and I'll never forget, I was in the car with my mom, and I hit her with this question. I said, Mom, do I have a dad? And as you might imagine, that was a pretty difficult question for a single mother to navigate with her 7-year-old. And it was the first time that my mom told me her life story. She was pregnant at 17, divorced a couple years later, pregnant again at 22, and then she was divorced from my biological father 6 months after I was born. So there she was, 22 years old, single mom, no high school education. And she explained to me, she said, Rory, I decided at that point that I would never have a man in my life because I haven't had good luck with men. And we may not have a lot, and we may not have a dad, but we're going to have love. And so we went back and forth for a little while, and I said, well, Mom, I love our family. I really do. I love our family, but I think it would be really cool to have a dad. And so she said, well, I'll tell you what, honey, if you want a dad, then why don't you go out and find yourself a good dad? What kind of crap is that? It just so happened that that was my first day at a new Shaolin Kung Fu center, and I had been studying martial arts since I was 5, and so they put me in this all-adult school to be a little more advanced. And there was another gentleman who walked in. It was his first day also, but this guy was much older than me. He had long hair and tattoos all up and down his arm and leather jacket, and he came in on a motorcycle. And this guy was about the scariest dude you can imagine if you're 7 years old, and he gets paired up as my sparring partner. His name was Kevin. He turned out to be pretty nice. Well, we started to advance through the belt levels together, and so Kevin started bringing me home from class every once in a while. Then before you know it, Kevin came over on the weekends, and we would practice our forms. And then we caught a movie, and then before long, Mom came with us to the movies, and so it was the three of us that were going to movies together. And I'll never forget the first time the two of them went to a movie without me. Well, as it turns out, Kevin and I tested for our black belts together on the same day when I was 10 years old. They got married 2 weeks later. A couple years after that, Kevin adopted me, and I changed my last name from Rory McLaughlin to Rory Vaden, and they have been married for 20 years ever since. And the point of that story is that you can delegate anything. But if you ask the average person, you said, are there things you know you could be delegating to somebody else? We would say yes. But then you say, well, why don't you train someone else to do it? And what most of us would say is we say, well, because they just can't do it as well as I can. And that may be true once, maybe twice, but it is only true absent the significance calculation. Because if you think longer term, you realize they'll be able to master the task just like you were. Significance changes everything. It's how you multiply your time. It's giving yourself the permission of imperfect for a little while, because over time they'll be able to figure it out. Now, if you can't eliminate, automate, or delegate a task, that task drops out the bottom of the funnel, and at that point there's only one remaining question. And that question is, should I do this task now? Must it be done now? Or can it wait until later? If the task must be done now, then that's what we call concentrate. It's the permission to protect. All right, the permission to protect. It's all about focus and eliminating distractions. And honestly, there's nothing all that exciting or new there. However, if you ask the question, can this wait until later? And you decide that the answer is yes, then that's not eliminate, automate, or delegate. That is what we call procrastinate on purpose. Procrastinate on purpose. Now, you're not going to procrastinate on it forever. You're going to pop that activity back to the top of the funnel, at which point it will enter into a holding pattern where it will cycle through the focus funnel until inevitably, one day, eventually, one of the other 4 strategies will be executed on whatever that task is. And what you find is that if something can continually wait, often what happens is you eventually develop the courage to do what you should have done in the first place, which was eliminate it. Or you discover a system for how to automate it, or someone rises up to the call of leadership. They rise up to the occasion, and it ends up being delegated. Or it ends up becoming something that is significant enough for you to spend your time on. A lot of people say, well, Rory, wait a minute. In the Take the Stairs book, right? In Take the Stairs, you said procrastination was the killer of all success. You said procrastination was the most expensive invisible cost in business today. You said procrastination is the foundation of all mediocrity. And now you're telling us to procrastinate on purpose? And yes, that is what I said, and it's exactly true how I said it. But there's a major distinction to realize, and that is there's a difference in procrastinating. There's a difference in waiting to do something that we know we should be doing that we don't feel like doing, versus waiting to do something because we're deciding that now is not the right time. Waiting to do something that we know we should do but we don't feel like doing, that's procrastination. That's the killer of all success. But waiting to do something because we're deciding intentionally that now is not the right time, that isn't procrastination. That isn't the killer of success. That's a virtue. And it's an art form that the world really needs, which is patience. The patience to put off the insignificant things, like checking email 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You multiply your time by giving yourself the emotional permission to spend time on things today that create more time tomorrow. And regardless of your religious affiliation or your spiritual beliefs, hopefully you'll have an appreciation for the way that Scripture says the world was created. And in Genesis, God has created this perfect world. And it says something amazing, that we're created in His image. And then in Genesis chapter 1, verse 28, He gives the first command to all of humanity. And what is that command? Thou shalt have no other gods before me? No. Is it love thy neighbor as thyself? No. God's first command to all of humanity: be fruitful and multiply. Thank you very much.
So to wrap up today's conversation, I want you to think about the things that Rory said in the video and see if anything resonates with you. Also remember that time is one of your most valuable assets. Planning and organization are the keys to priority management. Eliminating distractions will allow you to accomplish essential tasks, and most importantly, control your schedule instead of being controlled by it. Some important announcements and reminders about assignments this week. Make sure to sign up for our Week 5 one-on-one mentoring appointments using the link that was provided via email, and those are taking place next week, Tuesday, September 27th, 2022. We will not have a regular class meeting that day. Those appointments will take place either in our classroom, the Monitor Center room 205, or you can meet me outside the main library entrance upstairs in the Mon in those chairs by that front entrance. Journal entry number 4 is going to be due next week on Monday, and I will either upload that later today or sometime tomorrow and let you all know when it's uploaded. Attendance for this week is to complete and submit via email the I Can Manage My Time worksheet by the end of the day, tomorrow midnight on Wednesday, September 21st. If you don't have a printer, you can feel free to use Adobe Pro or Adobe to fill it out and send it back to me as a PDF. Or if you can print it out, feel free to do that, fill it out, make sure your name's on it, and take a picture and send it back to me that way. Here's a snapshot of the Devil Days calendar, so make sure to check out all of the cool events that are taking place on campus this week and next week. And as a reminder, your second of 5 campus event reflection forms is due by the end of next week, week 5. Thank you all for listening today. I hope that you feel a little more confident about how to prioritize your time and priority management. I'll look forward to seeing you next week in person for our one-on-one appointments during week 5.